Patch 5 has been out since January and Enshrouded, and it's time to update my top 5 build video with a bunch more hours of playing and testing. This guide is aimed to help you pick the right build, skiers, gear, and combination to fight the hardest boss in the game, Veil Dragon Youngling. Welcome back, gang. It's Deltia from Deltiasgaming.com here with one of my favorite games, Enshrouded, going over top 5 builds, and we're going to cover a little bit more details on them, specifically the skill trees, the best gear for them, how to play them, and what makes them good and why. But let's start with what's new in the game if you're returning to the game and wondering what you should pick up and why. In case you're returning to Enshrouded, patch 4, not 5, introduced a new boss, the Veil Dragon Youngling. It's just brutally difficult solo without a proper build. So patch 4 also introduced a new area, new environment mechanic that will freeze you to death in a new massive sprawling zone, and level cap increased to 35 along with gear that goes all the way up to level 33. With weapons going all the way to level 40. Also, since this patch, Enshrouded has announced a 2025 roadmap with tons of new content in the works and a full release sometime in 2026. Patch 5 specifically added a lot of social building crafting updates, so like voice chat, social hub, emotes, building improvements, new tools, gameplay improvements, dodge and blink activation a little bit earlier, and reworked the map and specifically the settlements. If you jump back into game, you'll notice previous places you explored and visited are quite different, so they've really tuned up the game quite a bit. But gameplay wise, more of the same in patch 5, but I fine-tuned some of the builds and played a lot more. So this is going to be based on overall combat performance, what is easiest to nuke mobs. We're talking survivability, damage output, ease of play, fun factor, and more. Let me explain the top 5 builds, and we're going to start off with number 5, and that's the Assassin. So the Assassin build is going to blend 2 specific skill trees, the Assassin and then also Beastmaster. The reason why is the Assassin skill tree is a lot about ranged bow damage, specifically special arrows like explosive arrows. However, the Beastmaster skill tree was reworked in patch 4, giving you poison daggers and increasing damage after a bow critical. So pairing daggers and bow along with the Assassin and Beastmaster skill lines is the best bet, giving you success for a great range damage and melee build. Look, the downside of the Assassin build is King Games has really yet to nail how stealth works. There's one specific passive that you could take in the center tree, Sneak Attack. Now this gives you a 10x multiplier, sounds great, right? But there's not like a camo or a stealth skill that you can apply on demand and automatically crit. So really you're relegated to using this in tall grass in the open world on critters that you really don't even need to kill via stealth. So it's kind of a poorly implemented design. It's still fun to use once in a while, but you're not going to be able to use this against a dragon or a boss or when you really need it. Backstab damage, however, you can. That's hitting from the flank or the back to increase your damage multiplier significantly. So if it weren't for this Sneak Attack, and if it's reworked, or get a specific skill that can camouflage you and you can automatically crit, this would move up the ranking a lot. Okay, so the most important skills for this specific build is right away is Battle Heal. When dealing damage with critical damage, your melee weapon, you will heal for 5% of your total maximum health. This isn't necessarily a melee brawler, but it's brutal at the start if you don't have a whole lot of healing. Battle Heal and then this Feast passive also pairs well together because remember, your critical, your healing return to you is based off your max health. So a big max health pool, really good to keep you survivable. In that same vein, this Dessert Stomach, since the level cap is 35, you can get a lot more skill points, 146. This will give you one more food slot. I use it on almost every single build, so you can have a lot of max stats. When you come into the bow, Shell Shock is really good along with Multi-Shot. This isn't going to be a full huge range build, but these two are critical, and Ranger just passively boosting all of your stat, very helpful. Then also there's a bunch of poison specific skills like Dagger Master, Poison Blades, and Poison Mastery. Talking about gear real quick, these Crystal Knives are my favorite. Gets Poison Blades, Sneak Attack, and also Health Leech. The Health Leech is super critical for this, and it pairs with Battle Heal. In fact, you can do a couple other heals with this. If you go to get these rings, these Gemini rings, very early in the game, 8% Life Leech along with Battle Heal, along with the heal on your individual daggers will keep you highly survivable. My favorite bow is this one right here, the Avalanche Starter. This is the max level one. It's going to also have Health Leech as its 5-piece bonus. So I hope you don't skip this part of the video, but in case you want to get these items, this is the new zone all the way up here. There are 2 specific chests that are really important to get. I put a home just outside of them. And what I do is I fly to this one, kill a bunch of critters, and then zoom teleport to this hollows, get another chest, log out, rinse and repeat, and you can have the best weapons in the game pretty early. It's not going to give you the armor though. So the armor is going to be crafted at the individual merchants. But those are the important gear pieces that you're going to want to get. Daggers on the front, bow, and then you can do a wand and shield to turtle up in a defensive posture and use wand attacks for medium range. So before I move on to the assassin, another thing that holds it back is since you're using like strength and daggers and you're using dexterity, you're using a bunch of different stats. So that kind of limits the build's potential dipping into multiple stat pools because you need a lot of health for battle heal, you need some strength for daggers, and you need dexterity for the bow. Otherwise, this will move up on the list once sneak attack hopefully is reworked or you get a specific skill that you can activate to trigger that big damage with sneak attack. Moving on to number 4, that's the Battle Mage. Okay, so the Battle Mage features this unique playstyle of half tank and half spellcaster and a little bit of healer. So this is an ideal build if you want a bit more group utility and or survivability at the expense of damage. So if you don't want to play a wizard full glass cannon or you're struggling surviving or you're playing with a teammate, pick up the Battle Mage. So the Battle Mage specific skill line is going to focus a lot on the wand. So you're going to be turtled up with the wand. It's a medium range weapon, and then also a shield so you can timely block at the same time. So Unity, Sting, Wand Master, these are very important skills for you to unlock. Also, you're going to dip into the tank skill line because you can get a whole lot of damage reduction like Tower, Warden, and Earth Aura. But you're not going to use Nemesis, which is basically the taunt mechanic. So you're going to be able to reduce damage and also heal people around you. Water Aura and Water of Life scales the healing based on your intelligence. It's not going to stack with other players, but it's really useful for self-healing if you're playing solo or in a group if someone else isn't running this. So you're going to want to have high health for survivability and high intelligence for damage and off healing or healing yourself just passively. It makes a big difference. A couple other skills that are really helpful is this life burst. When killing an enemy with a magic weapon, all players 15 meters gain health equal to 3 times your intelligence. That's why intelligence is so important to ramp up. Come over here, life essence. Your maximum health is increased 5-fold by your intelligence. Another reason to boost intelligence. Exalted critical. 1 intelligence for every 2 levels of flame that you have. Max level of flame is currently 8, so that's a lot of extra stats you get. Also, they moved up the bloodletting up here in the trickster skill tree, so when scoring a critical hit with a spell, there's a 50% chance to spawn 2 health, mana, or stamina orbs. This is where it's at now. Also, this good metabolism stacks with it, so health, mana, and stamina orbs are 30% rather than 10. Another really important skill is Dessert Stomach. Again, additional food slot is critical to maxing out your overall stats. I don't have this optimized right now because I'm not going to switch food between every single build in this video and go broke. But you get it. It's really important to max that. You can get a couple stats over 20. Very important. So when it comes to gearing this guy, there's a bunch of different wands at level 40. That's what you're going to want in your main hand. And then you're also going to want this shield or another one in your offhand. You're going to need a bow for the very final boss with stun arrows. Every single build basically needs this to knock it down very easily. You can deal without it, but not going to cover that. Also, you're going to be using the skill Be Gone. So this punches foes and stuns them at the cost of magic. So what I do is I have just charcoal on my bar so I can swap to my 3 key and just punch something and stun it when it's in melee range. This is a good way to swap in between your wand and shield and then just unarmed and shield to punch someone off, stun them, and then start wand attacking them as well. You do want to bring a staff with you just in case you want to charge and rip off huge heavy attacks. And spells. This crystal water staff is one of the best in the game because on hit 5% mana leech, that is really good, and ice damage since this new update is basically ice damage. So have 3 weapons on you at all time. Your individual character should go with a little bit more heavy. Most of your damage comes from your gloves and your head, so go with like a more damage optimal head and gloves, and then heavy in your chest and your legs, and then boot, depending on if you need resource sustain, you can do that, or just more health and survivability. So Battle Mage, really good build. It does sacrifice a lot of damage, and if you're playing the wizard optimally, you're going to be able to do way more damage and still get a lot of survivability because you just kill stuff quicker. I play the Battle Mage when I'm playing with my son. I just want to off heal or just not die and kind of help him around. So it's good if you struggle with survivability. But when you play the wizard and you play it optimally, fast paced, ripping off huge AoE fire attacks, there's just nothing compares as a spellcaster. Up next is number 3, and that is the wizard, formerly the greatest and most powerful build in Enshrouded, is knocked down to number 3. It's an AoE absolutely powerhouse in Enshrouded. And unlike the Ranger, it doesn't require endless farming in this crafting loop to do incredible damage via arrows. So the Wizard build is going to focus primarily on a staff and charge attacks, and it's going to have wand and shield for medium range or handling incoming damage. The Wizard can attain a bunch of different spells, so eternal spells, which launch over and over rather than a scroll, which is a one-time use, like Fireball, Acid Bite, bunch of different AoE ones, and you can also heal. Comes with the downside that charge can be interrupted and or canceled when enemies pound on you. That's why Quick Charge is one of the most important staff passives you can get right away for the Wizard. The Wizard, unlike the Battle Mage, is going to have a lot of crossover, but the Wizard is going to focus more on ramping up elemental damage. So specifically, you have something like Chain Hit. Critical hit with a magic weapon automatically hits a second enemy, and 5 shock damage per intelligence. So you want to ramp up intelligence, obviously. But you can see here all shock damage increased by 20, 10. Frost damage increased by 10, 20, and then you can slow down enemies that attack you in melee range. You got Pyro, so fire damage in this just melts fell enemies. At the beginning of the game when you're exploring the fell and it's very difficult, Radiant Aura and Sun Aura will absolutely blaze them down and make it a lot easier. But you're still going to take passes like Water Aura and Waters of Life because you're going to have a lot of intelligence and you want to passively heal. You're going to take a couple of the wand ones because you are going to turtle up quite a bit and hit this wand, and then Life Essence to get more health, Exalted to get more intelligence, and then of course the Dessert Stomach to get a lot more max stats. These stats are wrong because they don't have the right food on. Like I said, I'm poor and don't have a lot of the mid-max food to swap all the time. Forgive me. But specifically these Iceman, Sub-Zero, and Frost are really important now that they added a lot of Frost-specific damage and or weapons. So if we come here, we look at what I consider the best staff in the game, Crystal Water Staff, Ice Magic Damage. It has increased critical hit damage by 20 and on hit Mana Leech. That is absolutely humongous. And then you're going to pair it with the wand, also shock damage or fire. Ideally, you want to have one that is just one type of damage, but you know, this one's pretty good. So something like the Helix, that's just Shroud Magic, is also pretty good if you don't need the mana sustain. Now, when it comes to individual gear pieces, you have a couple of different things that you can do. So this has increased health regen, stamina, which is mainly meant for the Ranger, but you can go with the earlier one like Ring of the Ancients because it gives you a +1 to intelligence and a +1 to spirit, both useful. So that will actually increase your damage, where if Ring of the Gemini is not needed, this is the best bet to increase your damage a little bit. And then you can go with this if you need a lot more sustain, like increased mana and mana recovery. But I haven't found one that's super overpowered for the spellcaster because it just doesn't increase max stats like the other ones. The Wizard gets knocked back significantly because the Barbarian has just a lot more damage and survivability, even though you play in melee range and you don't have to charge your weapon. So it's similar to the Battle Mage, it's slightly different, a little bit more damage, but not enough to get the raw power of the Barbarian or the Ranger up with number 2 and 1. Up next, taking a massive leap into the second spot, is the Barbarian. Huge melee damage and powerful healing. And with this build, you're going to be using a massive two-handed weapon, and it rewards you for playing aggressive. One specific skill, Blood Rage, when you kill an enemy within 10 meters melee weapon, your damage done with melee weapon is increased by 20% for 10 seconds. So you're rewarded for killing some weak creature and then just start pounding the rest of them. One early skill that's going to carry your survivability is Battle Heal. When dealing critical damage with the melee weapon, you will heal for 5% of your maximum health. Maximum health, critical chance, and critical damage is critical for being able to sit there and face tank enemies. And to that end, like we talked about a little earlier, is this passive Feast. Meat now increases your health by additional 15%, along with Dessert Stomach, getting you an additional food slot. So you're going to have tons of health, tons of regen, and you'll be able to sit there and just melee brawl with tons of critters. Now, the game added this in patch 4, I think, which is Giant Slayer Hook. Your grappling hook to pull yourself towards enemies during combat. This is kind of like a gap closer. And then kind of cool with this is Ground Hook. Use your grappling hook to pull flying enemies towards you during combat. So you have a way to kind of close the distance with this or this and get those birds that sit there and scream super annoying, rip them down. If that weren't enough, you use evasion attack with the melee weapon. It kind of acts like a gap closer dashing towards the enemy. So use those 3 things in order to close the distance without using a bow. Now you're probably going to have to use a bow in the last fight with shrouded arrows to get that critter knocked down and then just start beating the crap out of it in melee range with your big, huge, massive two-hander. Early on, a lot of your damage comes from jump attack and double jump. So survivability wise, use a lot of double jumps and jump attack, slamming damage down until you get battle heal, then switch to just face tanking and melting things, and using the double jump strat for AoE. Also, this build is going to focus a little bit more on merciless attack, which is a mechanic that you have like a little stun gray bar above the enemy's head while they're blocking and you're just beating on them. So while that's going on, once that bar fills up, then you can deal this massive damage, overpowered attack. So you're going to take a lot of the passives to do that, and you're rewarded with this Blood Warrior spawning a health orb after defeating an enemy with merciless attack. So make sure you're trying to trigger that to get health back that way. It stacks with this good metabolism, increasing from 10% to 30%. So you have a bunch of different ways to get health back by just staying aggressive. And if that weren't enough, make sure you get the Gemini rings to get some life leech on your individual rings. And then some weapons have individual life leech with them. Speaking of weapons, something that's really important is I have this two-hander level 40. It's all blunt damage. So there's different types. There's cutting, there's slashing, and there's blunt. Now, why this is relevant, depending on weapon you're going to use, it depends on these two specific passives here. So you can see I have cutting damage, so I really don't want a blunt weapon if I'm just doing cutting damage. So this would be a better weapon for me to use. So make sure that you get your individual weapon that you like and then switch these two things out. So if I'm going to switch with that huge hammer, I want to swap these two. Yeah, if you respec, but you don't have to respec the whole thing now, thankfully. You can just do these two. Look, if it weren't for the range and maybe a little bit of stamina dependence, the Barbarian would be the #1 build just because the damage is so disgusting high. You do lack a lot of range that the Ranger has, but with that new grappling skill, you could make an argument it's the best build in the entirety of Enshrouded. I wouldn't have a problem with it. Next up is what I still consider the best overall build, and that is the Ranger. As for Ranger, this is the ultimate killer in Enshrouded. It has mobility, survivability, group utility, solo play, and it is a powerhouse. The only downside is you have to craft a lot to min-max its overall damage. So what separates the Ranger apart is its powerful skills and arrows. A lot of the ways to stack and amplify damage stack on top of each other like no other build in the game. You also have stun arrows meant for the dragon, shroud arrows, damage over time, explosive arrows 1 and 2, they go boom and can shoot out multiple times depending on your passives. Therefore, you have a bunch of different trees that you can use to min-max this and make life miserable for the enemy. And if we look at our stats on this guy, 27 dexterity, 24 intelligence. It's absolutely absurd. Let me explain why that's so powerful. We go into the skills here. I still take good old Water Aura and Waters of Life for the passive healing because it's just so stinking strong. It scales off of your intelligence. So even taking these passives down here like Life Essence, your max health is increased 5-fold by your intelligence. So they stack together really well. And then you can go here, increase your intelligence every 2 levels of flame. So you can see my character with these attributes, 12 constitution, okay, 1700 health. It is a massive amount, and I have passive healing built in. When it comes to damage, it gets really juicy. So you have tons of different multipliers. Infuse your range explosive with mana. They now stun enemies up for 1 second. So not only do you shoot these explosives, they can now stun. For every target you hit with an explosive arrow, its damage is increased. You're rewarded for AoE. Chain reaction. Every enemy hit with an explosive arrow has 20% to trigger a small explosion, 50% of the damage in a small radius. And then you have multi-shot. So regular arrows, 20% chance to spawn a flurry. Adds 25% to flurry of arrows with multi-shot, and then multi-shot was going to include special arrows, and it's not going to subtract for your actual ammunition. So essentially you can shoot 3 arrows, special or not, at a time. When you stun the dragon in 2 or 3 shots and it has no chance to hit you, this is why it's so stupid powerful. So we talked about Desert Stomach as well. We're going to take a different path with this one, which is Swift Shot Sustenance, and it's going to spawn an orb when defeating an enemy with the bow, so you're never going to run out of stamina. The reason that's useful is you don't need a lot of endurance. You're also going to stack a lot of backstab damage, so increased damage done from backstab, and then you come down here, backstab damage, increased damage you deal from behind as well. Those are going to stack together. So when you stun something with stun arrows, you're going to rotate behind, specifically the dragon, and just burn it down with that backstab damage or anything else. Also, backstab damage, I don't know if this is intended or not, but will trigger from a shroud arrow. Shroud arrow is like an AoE circular thing you shoot down and does damage over time. For some reason, if they're in the cloud, the mist, it somehow triggers this backstab. I don't know if it's telling that it's in on its back or what, but it's a cheesy way to do a lot of damage just by taking those two passives. We're also going to use Be Gone, so if you need to punt something off of you, just boom, swap to something on your bar with the shield. I also use, for this specific build, I do use Gemini Ring, so I'm just insanely tanky. You can use a lot of different ones. One that they want you to use is increased stamina and stamina regeneration. We don't really need that. You want even more damage, you can swap it in here. It's going to give you more max stats. Max stats equal max damage. So if we come back here, now we're at 29 and 26, almost 30 dexterity. That's thanks to a skill like Ranger, increase plus 2 dexterity, critical chance, and critical damage. No other skill tree has something like this. Speaking of no other skill tree that has something, Eagle's Bane, damage against flying enemies increased by 30%. And then you have headshot damage increased by 20%. No one else has that. Increased damage to ranged enemies by 15%. Nobody else has that. You just have a bazillion different ways to increase your damage, and it can't compare to anybody else. Downside is you have these stupid arrows. You're going to have to craft them, spend a ton of resources on them, but you're not going to really need to heal passively because you're just going to be doing so much damage. Nothing can really touch you. So I have a full Ranger video I actually did. So if you want that, a deep dive into it, I'll link in the video description, but still, it is the best. I still play a lot of the Wizard or Battle Mage just because I don't want to go do crafting and get the charcoal or whatever I got to do to make the explosive arrows. But if I just want to absolutely melt that dragon for whatever reason, I throw on this build, respec to it, get those stun arrows, knock it down, go from the rear and just explosive arrows like a Gatling gun, machine gun. It's awesome. Hope you got something out of this. Love Enshrouded. Keep watching, keep checking the websites for update, and we'll be covering the game until full launch. Can't wait till 2026. Thanks for watching.